professional sumo tournaments, the wrestlers fight one bout per day for 15 days.
If you win 8 out of the 15 matches, you can move up in rank half a slot. The difference of half a rank can be maybe $5,000 in paycheck a month, the respect you get in the Sumo Association. So when you talk about stuff like that, that 8th win, it's real critical.
A Rikishi entering a tournament's final 15th match with a 7-7 record has far more to gain from a victory than an opponent with a record of, say, 8-6 has to lose. If a wrestler has 8 wins under his belt, he is guaranteed to advance, even if he loses that last match. So he can afford to take a fall. In Japan, there's a term for match rigging, yaocho. Many suspected that sumo matches might be rigged, but it is nearly impossible to prove unless you look closely at the numbers.
2 wrestlers who I would expect to have an even match. When one of them needs the 8th win and the other doesn't, the one who needs it wins 75% of the time rather than 50% of the time. That is a huge deviation.
I, 8-6 wrestler, let you, 7-7 wrestler, win this deciding match because you, my friend, are going to fall down the pyramid if you don't. In return, the next time those 2 guys meet, lo and behold, the 8-6 wrestler almost always wins those matches.
1988年の9月から、相撲の取材を始めたんですけど、それから1月ぐらいでもそういうものがあるんだっていうのは分かりましたよね。僕らが肌で感じているその八百長の実態というか、まあ確かに証明しきれないものなんだけれども、それを数値的に裏付けてくれたなっていう印象は持ちましたね。本を一読して。原理的には簡単ですよね。別に前もって談合をして、勝つのか負けるのか勝負をあらかじめ決めておくと。でそこにお金が介在するわけですね。1番20万円だとか、あるいは30万円だとか、あるいはさっき言ったみたいに関取以下の幕下クラスだと2万円とか3万円とか、あるいはタバコ1カートンだとかね。ところが幕の内の優勝を争うような一番になると1000万円だとか2000万円だとか、あるいはもっとっていうケースもあるみたいですけど、それが基本的な八百長ですね。やはり自分から名乗り出て証言するという方はいません。それをすると相撲という村社会から弾き出されちゃうし、で彼ら長年相撲の社会しか知らないので、外に出ていたら生活できないんですよ。
お互いに知り合い同士で仲がいい相撲取りはお互いいるわけで、付き合いですから、地位が陥落したり関取の地位から落ちたりなんかすると相手に対して同情して、手を抜くというのが、基本だと思うんですけど、でそういったことをやってるってこと自体も言えなくなってしまう。僕としては相撲っていうのはそういうことありだってことをみんな見てる側も実は知ってるのに、それをだんだんと硬直化してなかったことにしていってしまったというのが、その辺の本音と建前といえば、若干そうなるかもしれません。
Hone is real truth, and tatemae would be the surface of things, the facade. They're unusually important in Japanese culture. That's why the Japanese have given them names. But being human, living in any society, I think we can all understand the concepts themselves. The tatemae is going to be a great spectacle of honest competition, but in the service of creating that pleasing facade, the actual players are engaging in a form of corruption. To have the hone exposed produces discomfort. When you think about the sorts of financial scandals that have racked America recently, a lot of people who were supposed to be not just incredibly wise but incredibly honest have been exposed as neither.
Those of us who have looked to the self-interest of lending institutions to protect shareholders' equity, myself especially, are in a state of shocked disbelief.
That produces a kind of disillusionment in any society that had formerly looked to those people or those institutions as somehow representative of what's best in that society. Sumo would be an example of that in Japan.
While I would not put the Bernie Madoff pre-arrest reputation, I wouldn't necessarily call that one of purity, the way we would talk about sumo wrestling or the way we might talk about the Catholic clergy, the SEC had an image of this guy that was almost sacrosanct in that he'd run an exchange. He'd been a market maker. His reputation was so large that it discouraged them from coming in with a bias toward corruption, and instead they brought a bias against it.
Rita, what do you have to say for yourself? What do you have to say to the public, to your investors?
The realm of high finance and the world of sumo both demonstrate that the illusion of purity can not only hide corruption, it can help to make it possible. In sumo, when whistleblowers stepped forward to expose corruption, they were not treated kindly. In 1996, two sumo veterans, including a recently retired stablemaster, collaborated on a tell-all expose that was serialized in the Shukan Post.
大鳴親方がやった時の衝撃は結構強かったと思いますね。それなりのポジションにいた人、結構実名を挙げていましたし、手口がかなり詳細だった。それも相撲協会としてはできたらなかったことにしようと思ったんだと思うんです。
The Sumo Association dismissed the allegations as lies, told by a vengeful stablemaster, seeking to cash in on publicity. To defend their claims, the whistleblowers decided to hold a press conference. But 2 weeks before the press conference, both men died. In the same hospital, on the same day, from the same mysterious respiratory ailment.
大変不思議な出来事だと。つまり納得できない出来事だったと当時は思いました。
当時はその相撲賭博がすごく華やかで、力士の勝った負けたっていうのはオッズをものすごく左右するわけですよね。だからそこで彼が全てを暴露するっていうことは、その日本の闇社会のある種のタブーを犯すことになるんで、そこで彼は死なざるを得なくなってしまったのかなと僕は解釈してますけどね。
Yet no one questioned the way they died. There were no autopsies. The police did not investigate the sudden and simultaneous deaths. It's a very good hospital, a police spokesman told reporters. So there were no grounds for suspicion.
だからでその遺族がその解剖を望まなかったってのあるんですけど、その前に司法解剖だろうっていう気はするんですけどね。相撲に対する見方そのものが、それは警察だけじゃなくて社会的にそうなんですけど、なんかちょっとこうアンタッチャブルっていうか、治外法権っていうかね、触りにくいところがありますよね。
Concerns about the sport resurfaced when another mysterious death haunted sumo. This time, it was a young rikishi in training named Takeshi Saito, whose corpse showed visible signs of assault and mutilation.
事件が発覚した後、親方は彼は稽古の上でのね、不慮の死であったと記者に対してそう答えているわけです。ところが事実はそうじゃなかった。そこで僕これはもう書くしかないなと思って書いたんですね。あれだけの傷を負いながら司法解剖されない、あれが自己死とされてしまう理不尽さ、それが日本に一体どのぐらいあるのかと考えると、やっぱりちょっとゾッとする話ですよね。一相撲界の話じゃない。そういった意味であの事件が投じた波紋っていうのはものすごく大きかったし、彼の遺体の語るものは多かったですよね。
Hiromasa Saikawa took note of the death of the young wrestler. Saikawa is one of the nation's most vocal critics of how murders are investigated in Japan. He quit his post on the Tokyo police force when the gap between the hone, the hidden truth, and the tatemai, the facade of propriety, had grown too wide.
日本の警察の殺人事件の検挙率は 96% をずっと超えております。これは到底信じられない数字でして、その数字は現実とは違うということを全ての警察官は知っています。
The job of any police force is to help keep crime at low enough levels so that society can properly function. the tatemae of the police force is to be seen as doing that. If the police, for example, can tell society, we solve 96% of crimes, they have certainly fulfilled their tatemae function in comforting society, making society feel safe. But to achieve that level of tatemae, the police might select only cases for investigation that they think they have an extremely high chance of solving.
他殺体が発見された場合ですね、その人物を殺した人間が誰なのかということが分かっている場合には殺人事件として捜査を始めます。ところが誰が殺したのかは分からない。犯人がいつまでも捕まらなかった場合ですね、それは死体遺棄事件のまま終わってしまうということがあり得るんです。警察もスポーツの選手も努力の成果というものが数字で評価されます。検挙した数字だけでその警察が評価されると。いい数字さえ上げられれば実際はどうであるのかを問わないという傾向がありますね。さまざまな工作をして数字を上げようとしますね。それで私は警察を辞めたいと思います。
Despite clear evidence of brutality, the police declared that the young man died of natural causes, and the stable master quickly asked for the boy's body so it could be cremated. But the angry father of the young man insisted on an autopsy, which revealed that he had been burned with cigarettes and beaten to death with beer bottles and baseball bats. The young boy had died at the hands of fellow wrestlers who were ordered by their stable master to punish the boy for trying to run away from the world of sumo.
相撲界にとっては非常にショッキングだし、もうこれまでのやり方は通用しないのだよということを明らかに示しているし、それから僕が書いた八百長の記事をきっかけに相撲界に対するその見方が世間非常に厳しくなっているので。
Sumo countered criticism with lawsuits against Takeda and his magazine. Juries ruled against Takeda in cases where he accused individuals of match rigging. But sumo had no defense against the revelations of violence. To defend its reputation, the Sumo Association shores up its image by building on notions of purity from Shinto that are essential to what it means to be Japanese. Publicly, they insist that Yaocho is a myth.
I hope there was none of that going on in the bottom ranks, but where I was, no.
そういうしかないでしょ。俺もそういうふうに言いたいけどね。八百長なんかないとか。俺は正直に言うしかないからね。
A retired Rikishi who rose to Komusubi, the fourth highest rank in sumo, Keisuke Itai came forward and publicly admitted to fixing many matches, and named names of others who did the same.
彼は非常に強い力士でしたね。張り手一発で相手をノックアウトさせちゃうような。彼の師匠の親方が彼が相撲界に入ってすぐに八百長を仕組んだんですね。で彼は知らず知らずにその世界にはまり込んでしまった。だから麻薬と一緒で八百長っていうのは一回始めちゃうとなかなか抜け出せないんですね。八百長を経済システムと仮定して言いますけど、大きなお金はそのピラミッドのトップの横綱に集まるんですね。何千万円というお金が仮に集まったとして、でそれを下にあまねく潤していく、相撲界全体に潤していくんです。そのためのツールとして八百長がある。
結局力士全体が真面目に取ればすごいなんていうか神がかりのスポーツだと思いますけどね。今でもやっぱり真剣勝負見ればやっぱり感動しますしね、八百長見ればがっかりするし、 そんな感じかな。僕らはもう全部わかりますから、相撲を見てて真面目に取ってるか取ってないかぐらい。
しかし欧米では建前とは違うことをやった場合であってもですね、時間の経過とともにそれが明らかにされることがある。例えば公文書なんかも30年経てば原則公開するとか、日本の場合それが全くありません。永遠に闇に葬ることができるという強い信念を持っているようですね。
In Japanese media, there's a certain form of self-censorship. Giving interviews in Japanese, the media will not quote me if I use the word daraku, which is corruption in Japanese, and they'll change that instead to something like konran, confusion. We certainly have the very same thing in America today. The New York Times, for example, will not use the word torture to describe anything that's been carried out by Americans in operating our prison system in the war on terror. However, if it's the Chinese who've done these things to an American airman, the New York Times has no compunction about calling those things torture.
The only way to combat corruption, says Stephen Levitt, is to change rules to undo corrupt incentives, unleash more investigative reporters, and develop strong protections for whistleblowers. But that's easier said than done when cultural slogans in America and Japan reassure us that we're honest, straightforward, and fundamentally good. Those who expose corruption are challenging the very nature of who we imagine ourselves to be.
The irony of our analysis of sumo wrestling was when it became public, the sumo wrestlers stopped cheating. And not for good. They actually stopped cheating for a year or two, and then once people stopped thinking about it, they went back to it. But that, I think, is the answer to how you stop cheating. That Louis Brandeis said that sunlight was the best disinfectant.
What keeps us from seeing corruption are our illusions that our economy is a rational system, a free market open to all. The fact is that rigging markets and matches is good business if the rigging is hidden from all but a few. In Shinto, the mirror is an important symbol, reflecting a sense of who we are. In that mirror, the bad heart is a hidden heart. The pure heart is one that hides nothing. Looking at the numbers and accepting what they tell us is a way of wiping dust away from the mirror.